Okay, so start recording. Okay, back into it. So yeah, there's where to find the exercise submission folder and everything else you need to find if you miss anything. Okay, so now we're gonna look at anatomy of the web page. So when you load a page, when you load to on google.ca, your web browser is going to do a pull from like a server somewhere, and they're going to get all these files. And then we're going to find out through this session and through the course just how to make these files. And then when your computer gets these files, they're going to load the page, and that's what makes a website. So all these files are working together, and they're going to pull from each other, pull different information from each other. And then that's going to be presented to you as the viewer at the end. So we're going to talk about, how does it know what to show you, and things like how does it get the information. This will be kind of the second half of the course, is this last part. But then the first half of the course, we're just going to look at how things are displayed to you, what you see, and how we make that. So what is a web page? There's three main parts of a web page. So this session, we're going to be talking about these first two, and then we'll dive deeper into JavaScript in later sessions. So HTML basically is the structure and content. I like to think of it as a skeleton. So it's how your page is defined. So if we go back to this Ignite website, it's how things are laid out. So why are these words where they are? Why are these words saying what they are? And why is this top bar and things like that? For CSS, this is how it looks. So if we go back to the Ignite website, why is this text red? Or why is this text this size? Why is this height, this red bar at the top? Why is that as high as it is? And then JavaScript is going to be everything for like behaviors. So when you click on things, why when you click on something does it do what it does? How do things move around on the page? Things like this. And once we get into it, you'll understand it more, and you'll be able to make it yourself. So jumping deeper into HTML. So like we said, it's the structure. So this is a block of text. So basically it's what is on the page. So nouns on the page. So like things that you can see, everything that you can see will have something in HTML that corresponds to it. So that blue block of text with an image underneath. So block of text, noun, image underneath, noun. If you're saying this text is blue, that's not a noun. So that's not HTML. And then the order too. So the order that they come in is HTML. So because this is in front, the text is in front of the picture. We could put the text behind the picture, and if we want to change that, we change the HTML. Syntax, we'll show a bit of code later, but this is called a heading or a header, and that's why it's called H1, and this is called an image, so you shorten it to IMG. And everything in HTML has a start tag, and not everything in HTML, but most things in HTML have a start tag and an end tag. So once we get into the code, you'll see it. Actually, I can show you right now. So if we look at the code here, we see, just a little sneak peek, there's a starting H1 and there's an ending H1. So everything, this one is two tags. This is a P tags. We'll talk about what those tags actually mean. And then inner content, which is basically what's inside of it. So this will have a tag here and a tag here, basically an H1. And this inner content is whatever is inside of it. So whatever you're seeing, not the tag itself, but what's actually being displayed. And the attributes, we'll talk about those as well. So that is little like optional things you can put into the tags to edit how the tag is displayed. So we're going to break off into our first exercise. And we're going to be looking at tags and just how to make an HTML file. So you'll go with your mentors, and you'll just put things on, you just practice putting things on a page for different, like in HTML, and just put stuff on the page and play around with HTML files. So the breakout rooms can start. Am I doing that?
Yeah, I will start the breakout room.
Okay, go for it. Okay, so hopefully you can figure those out, and if not, we'll have more breakout rooms later. So you can get those fixed then. So, okay, so here's a motivating example, just like a basic site that we can make with just HTML is on the site right now. I have this one running, so we'll go and look at it. Yeah, so this is just HTML. Everything you see here can be done with just like the structure. If you did the exercise, you would see that like you just type in these different this content into different tags. So we'll look more into this as the session goes on, but these tags, they're displaying differently, not because of CSS, but because of just the different tags have some very, very basic like how they're displayed. So yeah, image and then headers and stuff. And then you can find the example if you go here to the day one folder, and then in this top of the slides, if you go back to the top of the slides, you can find the GitHub, and it has all these HTML and files there. Yeah, so tags. So we're gonna look at a bunch of different tags now. And then these are just the different things you can put inside these square braces, and they'll display different things. So yeah, the first one's paragraph. This is the most basic one. It's just words. They're usually pretty small. When you see a website and it has like a bunch of text that you're supposed to read, and it's like their content, like if you have a book or something, or if you're on a Google document, those words, that's what's going to show up as the paragraph tag. It's going to be small, and it's going to have like your content. So the heading tags, you have 6 of them. You have H1 through H6, and H1 is your biggest one. It's going to make something really big like this. And H6 is your smallest one. Yeah, and it goes down like that. So H1, H2, smaller as you go. You can do H1 as like a main header, and then have H2, H3 as subheaders, things like that. Yeah. Attributes. So yeah, attributes, like we said, like I mentioned before, attributes are things you put inside of tags that kind of say what it's about. These aren't going to display on it on the screen, but they're just going to tell the tag kind of how to behave. So the browser is going to read these, the A tag here, and it's going to say, okay, this is an anchor tag, and then it's going to anchor to this reference. So if I click on this link on a web page, then it'll take me to shootignite.com. And then if we go back to this page here, we see the click here. So if I highlight over it, you see on the bottom left of my screen there, it says the link. So if I click on it, it'll take me to the oxygen not included game page, and it knows where to take me because we go to the code. This href here tells me where to go, and that is a attribute. Another attribute here also, target blank, means it'll pop you out to a different it'll pop you out to a new tab. So if I go back to this page, when I clicked on the link, it opens a new tab, and that's because we have that blank attribute. We have this target blank attribute. And then, so those are just 2 attributes for the anchor tag, but other tags have different attributes, and we'll learn about those. Yeah, so anchor tags. So these are just links. And then you'll put wherever it's going here, and then that blank, yeah, we talked about that blank thing already. Self will be in the same tab, and blank will be in a new tab. These things you don't have to memorize. All these anchors, this is where you would go and look up anchor tag href, or sorry, anchor tag target options on Google, and it'll give you like a list, and that's how you find these things out. A lot of these different anchor tags, like A is going to have a bunch of them, and so is paragraphs and things like that. So you don't have to memorize all these. But if you know they're there, then it makes it a lot easier to look up and find these things, and so you can make it do what you want. Inner content and nesting. So we can put HTML tags inside of HTML tags, and that's what we're doing down here. We have an H1, and then an anchor tag, and then a hello world, and then an anchor tag and H1 tag. So you see the anchor tag is kind of nested inside of this header, which makes it bigger like this. So if we go back, we see that this link here is small, but then since you put it in an H1 tag, which if you recall is the header tag, it's going to make it look like a header, and it's also going to make it act like an anchor tag or like a link. So it kind of combines both of them. And then again, back here, we see this somewhere like body as a tag, which we'll talk about. And all these tags are inside of it. And then we have OL, which we'll talk about in a few slides. And like you can nest these tags and they'll kind of inherit whatever's above them. Or be like there's certain behaviors that'll happen based on what you put inside of certain tags. Okay, so quick question. This is going to be on top hat, and here's the join code if you missed the join code. And it's what are the attributes here and what are their values? So I'm going to start. Okay, so it should be started. Yeah. I'll make it 2 minutes. So yeah, you guys have 2 minutes to answer this question. I'll make it 3 minutes just in case some of you guys haven't joined yet. Okay, cool. So if we're looking at this question, the elements are div h1 and the a for anchor, and then their attributes are this attribute one value, href, and the target blank. Question 2, we have what will show up. So I will open that up. And I'll increase this to 2 minutes as well. Okay, sweet. So for this one, we have, it's in a div, which is just a basic, like it just holds things. And hidden equals true. So because hidden equals true, nothing. So yeah, it should be nothing because hidden equals true. So it shouldn't be there. Okay, here's another tag image we've talked. Yeah, so this is just an image. You have a URL to whatever you want to display. And then it'll show up. So it'll either grab the image from a URL or from the internet, or also you can have a file path. Yeah. So you can have the image as like a PNG or a JPEG inside the folder that your HTML file is in. And then you can just say dot slash wherever the file is. So if you can have something on your computer or on the web. So you have this URL, we'll grab the file for this image from the internet and then put it into your website if you do this in your HTML. Lists. So you have two kinds of lists. You have outer list tag. So OL or UL. This is ordered list or unordered list. Ordered list means you just have a numbers like numbered on your list. So this here is actually ordered list. We have 1, 2. And then if we go to the page title, yeah. So here we have, this is a ordered list because it has a 1, 2. We go to the code. We see an ordered list here. And then we don't have to specify the 1 and the 2 on the HTML. It'll just do it for us because we specify that's an order list. And then unordered list here, we'll do the dot here. So it won't have numbers. It'll be as it like sounds unordered. It'll keep the order you have it in. So if you have diving and then like whatever swimming, it'll keep the order that you have here. That's not like unordered doesn't mean it'll mix it up. It just means it's not going to number it. Yeah, and then so you need the OL or UL outside of the list. So it's going to wrap these list items. So then you have like the list tag, and then inside the list, you have all the different items you want. And that's the same for unordered and ordered list. So yeah, order list. We have the numbers here, 1 and element 2. Yeah. So it's numbered here because it's an ordered list. Unordered list, same thing, except for no numbers here. Divs or dividers, usually just call them divs. They hold things together. So if you just have a div tag, like div open, div closed, it's not going to have anything special about it. It just groups things together. So inside of divs, we usually put, so here's a header and then, yeah, header, some text, and then an image. We'll just do this to put things together. So on the Ignite website, we'll put this header thing, we'll put everything here inside of div, and we'll probably call it header. And it'll have this image, these words with links on them, and then we'll close the div, and then we'll have all this content in another like content div. And it just for us as developers to be able to group things together. So then it makes it easier to apply CSS to these elements if you have them all in a div. And it also makes it easier to develop, and you can just see things all grouped up and you know that those are kind of all related. Comments. So if you've all worked with Python before, comments are not going to display on the page. They're just going to be for you guys. So as developers, we can read these comments and it can tell us what is on the page, what's in the code, what things are doing in the code. But for the user on the web browser, they're not going to see any of this. So this is, yeah, just for you and others. Just look at the source code. You don't have to worry about anything you put in here being shown to anybody on the web browser. You can also, if you want to get rid of things and test things out, you can comment out a section of HTML code and it won't show up. And then you can like when you're debugging, you can test that out. I wonder if there's a comment. Yeah, so there's a comment in here. We have example 1, and it should be above Kieran. But we don't have it. Yeah, so we have Kieran here and there's no example 1 up here. And that's because it's a comment. And then, yeah, so here's some advanced tags. There's so many tags in HTML. This is another thing, you don't have to memorize all of these things. And as you use them, you'll get more familiar with the different types of tags. So yeah, there's tables, there's forms, things like this. Yeah, these are some links that you can go and find different tag types. And you can just explore these different things. Yeah, so HTML comes with some boilerplate, and that's just code that we have wrapped around like kind of the meat and potatoes of what our site wants, like we want our site to look like. And this is just things that help the browser. Yeah, so set up how the browsers want it. So it just tells the browser kind of how you want to display it. We'll go to the code and look at this later, but there's like a type declaration, HTML tag, head, and body. So if you go back to this code here, we have head and then body. And then yeah, HTML wraps everything. HTML starts up here and ends down here. And then we have head, which is, yeah, so metadata, which is just like things about the page that the browser wants to know, but the viewer doesn't really need to know. So this is where you put things like these things, you can look up what they mean, but they're just special different I don't want to say attributes, but they're different options we can have that help out with the browser and the browser showing of the page. And then the body tag is where you put other content. So inside of body tag, we have all of what we actually want to see on the page. Yeah, so here's template. So yeah, we see that there's like, this is a very simplified version, but we have HTML head body. You can make this very simple thing to start coding. If you go to your HTML file, you start with a new HTML file and you do, if you have Emmet, so there's a few things you have to install first, but if you have Emmet installed, which I think comes with the HTML package on VS Code, you can just do exclamation mark and then it'll come with everything. So we see HTML body head. I think you can also do HTML, yeah, HTML5, and it'll come here. So it has all the different things you need, and then you can just start coding right in here. Yeah, so HTML tag, everything in there, metadata in the head tag, content in the body tag. Yeah, so there, yeah, you saw in the GIF when you the HTML5. So we're going to go into our breakout rooms, and we're going to make the template. Yeah, so you can use HTML5 or exclamation mark, and then you can ask questions for your mentors about how to put things in. And then if you have this set up early, then you can just start putting things in the body and seeing how it displays on the page. So I will start breakout rooms. Okay, they started. Yeah. Okay, sweet. So yeah, hopefully you got that figured out. And got started with coding those things in the body tags. Next, we're going to move on to CSS. So we've looked at the basics of HTML, and then now we want to know, once we get things on the page, how do we make them look the way we want them to look? And that's all CSS. So CSS, yeah, it defines how it looks. And then since HTML was nouns, this is now adjectives. Things like blue, like this is big. This is, yeah, blue, 3M, which is a size. And then 250 pixels is another size. So how big it is, what color it is, what orientation it is. So is it like twisted, like spun a little bit, or is it fixed? Does it take up the whole page? When you scroll it, what does it do? When you highlight over it with your mouse, what does it do? These are all things CSS covers. Yeah, so CSS, there's three things. There's 3 ways to do CSS. So we can do inline CSS on the HTML, style tags in the HTML as well, but in the head, and then separate files. And we'll look at these. Yeah, so inline, you can use CSS as an attribute. You can say style and then put CSS in there. Yeah, so down here, style, and then here's your CSS. So we have what color do we want it? We want it red. And CSS, yeah, so it always goes whatever attribute you want, a colon, what value you want the attribute to have, and then a semicolon. Color, colon, red, semicolon. Font size, 24 pixels. And then that's how HTML works. And these will just color the H1 tag. So everything inside of this H1 tag with the style will be red and 24 pixels. And then yeah, here it'll look like this. Style tag goes at the top in your head tag. So in that metadata part at the top we were talking about, we can have style open close and then put H1 color red. So this is just going to apply to all the header 1 files, header 1 HTML tags, and it's going to color all of them red. File, we can have the whole external CSS file. So when we make the HTML files, we do .html, and then here we're going to have .css. And that's going to have, when you make an HTML file, it's going to have all of these sorts of rules. So it's going to have like the tag in these curly braces with all the different attributes and values you want them to have. And that's going to all go in a separate file. And then when the HTML file is loaded in, it's going to go and look through the CSS file and figure out how it wants to display things and what values and what colors and things, and what's it put on these HTML tags. Selection. So once you make a CSS rule, you have to select. Yeah, so you have to select which ones you want it to affect. Because if you just say color red and you don't specify what you want it to color, the browser doesn't know. It doesn't want the background to be red. Sorry, it doesn't want the H1 tags to be red. It doesn't want the paragraph things to be red. It doesn't want the anchor tags to be red. It doesn't know. So if you go to this link, it'll show you selectors, and we'll cover a few. Yeah, so you can either tag. So one of them is you can do it by tag name. So we have the tag, which is the element. All the elements with H1 tag will be colored white in this case. And we just have to write it here. So if you want to do a paragraph, all you would put is P and these curly braces, and all the paragraph things will be colored or whatever you want to do inside those curly braces. It'll apply to all of this tag, and it'll be H1 through H6, or you can put anchor tags and do all the anchor tags in a certain way. Yeah, that's one way to select it. Next is by class. So every HTML element can have this attribute class, and you'll put text red. And then in the style, we see here we have dot text red, and this dot means classes. So if we go back, we see the H1 tag has nothing before it. It just says H1, and that means you're selecting the tag H1. But if we do a dot, we're selecting the class text red, and then we're going to color red. So these two are going to be colors text red. If this P class didn't have this text red, then it wouldn't be colored. It would just be the H1 class. Next is ID. ID is very similar to class, except for you have to put ID here instead of text, class. And this is text1. And then you do a hashtag text1. Okay, so if you have different, like, so if my H1 tag has ID text1 and class text1, and it has, let's say, ID text1, and that has color red, but then we have class of color green, and then we have the color of that green, it's always going to default to the ID. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets, and that just means it's going to look for the most important attribute for it. So if it has multiple colors, it's going to look for the most important, and ID is more important than class, and class is more important than tag. Yeah. So nested elements, if we want to have all the P tags inside of the div classes as black, then we do this. We have div P. So if when we nested elements like this, when we have order list and L1, we could have OL space L1. Or if we put all these in a div, we did this div, and then we put these things in a div up here, we can have All of these things can be colored as div and then p. We can do div space p in our style sheet. And that'll just color all the p's in the div, and it won't color like this one, for example, because it's not inside of a div. And if we want to nest just the direct, so when you nest, you can nest a bunch of different, like you can have a div and then a div and then a div and then a p. If we want just a div and then the p, we can do this where we just have the direct children. And that's, yeah, the first layer of them inside the div. So if you have div paragraph and then a div and then another paragraph, it's not going to go all the way down. Or like a div paragraph, an anchor tag, a paragraph. It's not going to go all the way to that furthest paragraph tag. It's just going to go to the first one because of this arrow here. And this is done right now. We have it as in the style tags, but we can do that in the CSS file as well. Quick question 3, how do we make all of this text red? And here are your options. And I will open that up. Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes for this question. Okay, so for this one, it's B. Yeah. So that's just because one way to tell pretty easily is that color is how we say color and not font color. And that's one easy way to tell. Yeah, and then we see, so body here is going to cover everything in the body. H1 is going to cover these two, this H1 tag here. And then color red is going to, text red is going to color this one text red. But since these are all contained within the body, this one will make everything red. Yeah, so on VS Code, you have VS Code is awesome. It gives you all these like autocomplete things. And then for color, you have this little box here that you can manually edit the color. VS Code is a great help for this. And it does this for other, like it's not just color, you can try it with other values as well. So yeah, motivating example number 2, we have the same thing from earlier, except for the text is all white, the link is green, and the background is black. So you guys are going to go into your breakout rooms and try to do this to the exercise. If you have trouble finding the exercise, there's the link, I think, at the top of these slides, and you can go to the GitHub and grab the files there. Yeah, and yeah, good luck. Okay, cool. So yeah, hopefully you figure that out. Messing around with the site and fixing colors and things like that. Yeah. So next we're gonna look at these different things that can cover a bunch of different tags and not just one tag at once. So we have height and width, which are exactly what they sound like, the height of the element and the width of the element. And then they can have like max height and max width here for when you make a window size bigger or smaller. So when you make your browser and you zoom in and out, things change size. And if you want to cap those things, you can use these different min and max height things in your CSS. Measurement units, there's a ton of different measurement units. The important one, pixels is very important, and that's just how many pixels on your page you have. And then percent is how much it is of the parent element. So if you have like a div that's a certain size and you have another div inside of it that's 50%, it's going to cover half of that of whatever it's inside. So when we nest elements, you can use a percentage. And then yeah, you can look these other ones up if you want to be a little bit more specific about it. Yeah, so universal example. So yeah, here we have background color is used in a lot of things. We usually on div, color, text, href. This is just a dummy thing. So you have a link, but it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, and there's, yeah, so view height, here we have height. Element spacing, there's a bunch of different like things that you can space things out with. Margin, border, and padding. So your element is inside this blue box here, and then you have padding. A border is what it looks like. And if we go to the Shoot Ignite page, where's an example of this? Maybe it's not one here. Yeah, but if like the border is going to be this small border on the outside that you can put, and the padding is going to be whatever's inside that border, and the margin is going to be whatever outside. So if you want elements to be just spaced apart, then you add margin. If you want an element to be bigger, then you'd add padding. If you do background color, that's only going to apply to padding and not to margin. Yeah, so padding just makes things bigger. You can do it top, left, bottom, right. Same with margin. Or you can just do padding and then have like a certain amount of pixels and it'll just do make a box. So this could have been broken down into just padding 5 pixels instead of all these things, but it's shown here just to show you that those are options. Margin, same thing. Margin is going to add this. So if the padding is the black part here, then the margin is going to be the white part. It's just going to break it away from other elements. Yeah, and you can look at examples here and in GitHub again. Border, we can either, so border radius is just how round it is. Like when OS update and stuff, sometimes they either make them square or round. And they're just like styling and things like that. You can make, if you want like a round and like a squishier and like a softer site, you can have it rounded. And that's just like you change the border radius and you make it bigger. If you want it square, you have it 0. These are used a lot on images, but they can be used on other elements as well. So designing from scratch, writing all these CSS rules by yourself and having a design in your head and actually executing it is very hard. So you can make things look good by following what other people have done. You can, so one way to do it is you can work your way inward. So yeah, starting from the outside, and then you just start basically box sizing. You do the biggest change first, and then you work your way down, and then the last one should be like very specific changes. So right now we have font family at the bottom, and like this is a very big change, and then just smaller and smaller changes. And even like if you have just the top 3, it'll look basically like you want it to look, and then adding font family just changes it a little bit. Yeah, and then the code there is in the chat. Yeah. So one way to do it is to break, yeah, so we said break things into divs is a lot easier, and then you put classes on them. So when we looked at the Street Now website, we saw the header. That whole header shares a div, and then you can, yeah, this header here shares a div, and we can edit that CSS by itself instead of editing sessions, student links, media, about, contact by itself. We can edit this whole thing in a div, and that's the beauty of divs. You can group things together and then apply CSS to all of them at once. That's a lot easier than just having everything by itself and having to edit CSS for all the different elements. Yeah, so these things are just things you want to look out for when you're designing, like width, font, colors. individual elements. Those are kind of the main things when you look at a website. That's the thing. That's what you make note of right away, and that's what you notice right away. So these are things we want to change and put as much thought of, put like the priority on when we're designing. Content width, yeah. So 100% of the page is not always nice, but it can. Yeah. So always best. So, but we don't always want our content all the way, and it depends on what kind of design you want. Yeah. So there different sites use different things. It depends kind of on what you're going for. Yeah, so here we have full bleed. So this is, I think, yeah, the Apple, maybe not Apple website, but the website, some websites do the whole screen and they'll have content from one edge of the screen all the way to the other screen. Some will have it, this is a mixed one. So it has it from one side to the other side in the header, and then it kind of breaks it down and puts it padded. And this is just full padded. So there's always a space on the left and right side. And it's a design choice. So it's not, there's not one way that works in all cases. You just have to know what you want and kind of what you want to display, and then you can go from there. Texts, and these are fonts. You use these in Word or Google Docs. It's just how, so yeah, so we have like this fancier one, a little bit broken up, and then this like, I don't know, Comic Sansy type thing. And this is just the font of the text. So, and you want it to be readable, but you also want it to look nice. So fonts, yeah, font family is going to be the font type. So that's going to be your Arial, your sans serif, whatever. Font sizing, the size, and these different things do different things to the text. This is again something you can look up and you don't have to memorize it. And then they can all have different like values to them. Custom fonts, you can import custom fonts, and it's a little more tricky than just doing the normal custom fonts, but you can read the article on how to do it. Line height is how spaced apart the lines are, kind of what it sounds like. So yeah, the values are on the bottom here, and you can see with a smaller value, you're going to get a lot more squished lines, and sometimes the writing can even like cross each other. So yeah, 1.6 is a good choice. Play around with it and see what looked best for your site. You want it to be readable, but if you have it super far apart, it's hard to read. And if you have it really small, then it can get squishy. And this is like really hard. It's impossible to read on the left. And then these two on the right look a little bit better. Yeah, line height, smaller text needs more line height. Just because when you're reading it, like if you have an essay and it's double spaced, it's just easier to read than a single spaced essay. It looks nicer. Same thing with websites. For mobile web development, so when you open like Safari on your phone, sometimes line height can mess things up. So we see on the website, on the Schulich website here, where it's crossing over, but we want it to be spaced. So that's just a line height issue. Yeah, so these are two tools you can play around with for doing line height and figure out the best one for you. Color. Color is going to be your text color, not your background color. So all colors the same. You kind of want a theme. So your headers can be different colors and then your body can be different colors. Again, look at sites that are already made by other people, and you can kind of tell what like a best practice is for this. If you have headers and they can stand out as a different color, but then if your text is all a bunch of different colors, it's super hard to read. Text align, you can look that up. You probably don't need to change it, but if you need to, there's resources for what that does. Line height we talked about, and these other things are just fonts and like how your text is shown up. Yeah, so here's the CSS for this part on the right, and then the code again, yeah, is in the chat. And this, so yeah, we have font family, line height, margin, math width. We can see like the margin we set to 0, and then max width is how wide it is. So this is going to affect if we make the page bigger, smaller, how it's affected. And then we just did all the header tags. We want them to be serif and then a certain size. So we have these header tags are a certain size, and then the others are smaller. And that, yeah, line height 1.6. This is what it looks like, and that's like it's really easy to read. It looks nice. If you want it bigger, you can, but this is a good rule of thumb. So here's another exercise. So you have that site from before that we edited. Now just go in and apply these different CSS rules that we have been talking about. Okay, awesome. Next up, we're going to talk about colors on the page. So this is important because you want it to be readable. So we'll look at a few examples, and we just want the color of the text in the background to be easy on our eyes and to be readable. So contrast is basically like the difference between the text and the background. This is not a good contrast and it's hard to read, and this is like good, like well contrasted, so you can read easier. Yeah, like just reading things that are different is a lot easier to read. Yeah, so there's two links here that you can check out contrast. Both of them are tools you can put in two different colors and it just gives you a rating for your site. When you do black or dark mode, you don't want it to be black. So yeah, VS Code has a nice dark mode and it's not black, it's just a gray. Black is really hard on your eyes, and you'll very, very rarely see a full black site just because they look like pretty bad and they're really hard to look at. So usually they're dark gray. Yeah, and looking at the slide is kind of hard because it's just so bright. Before you do a color like this, think about the color and if it's actually a good idea. It's probably not. And it's just hard to read and doesn't, like, people don't want to be reading a site that looks like this. This spacing on the side, yeah, so you can put this color on the side, or you can move this to its CSS. Another thing that comes up with the slide is that if you want to debug something, you can always just make its color like red, and you can see where it is, and it helps you kind of figure out what's going on. Yeah, so HTML has its own background color, and then content has other color. You need to just like be aware of that when you're coloring pages. Yeah, so there are like all these different links for ways to customize elements. CSS is a huge language, and you can edit things infinitely. We don't have time to go over it in this course. So just play around with it and research and stuff, and you'll find a ton of fun ways to edit your sites. So we talked about this a little bit earlier with the IDs and the classes and the tag names. And like CSS has this precedence level that just like it takes the most important thing. So inline style tag and file, your inline is going to have the most. And there's just all these rules that say how things are, like what's more important than other things. If you have an element and you're trying to color it a certain way, but it's not working, it's probably because your precedence is right and you have something that's more important that's overriding whatever you're trying to write. Yeah, this important tag will overwrite things, will like be the most important thing you have. If you have multiple important tags, it'll again take from the old precedence rules. So that's why important is sometimes frowned upon, but it's also good if you just really need something to show up on the page and it's not working. This important tag will usually fix that. Yeah, so inline style tags and files. Inline is the most important to files, and then also with IDs, classes, and tags, it also goes like ID class tag. Yeah, here's some resources on just other CSS ruling. Again, it's a huge language and you can find a bunch of stuff about it, and these are some resources to check out. So yeah, next week we'll talk about frameworks. This is kind of, people have made CSS, these like bundles of them, and just to make your site look good, and it's a lot easier to use. And they're kind of like pre-written, and you can make your site look good a lot faster. Okay, we're gonna go pretty fast through existing web pages because a lot of you guys know what's going on. I want to give you time at the end to work on the exercises with your mentors. Yeah, so as developers, there's a joke, we always steal code, and it's pretty true. And it's on the web, like on websites, it's very easy. We can do dev tools and we can steal, and we can like not steal, we can look at things on a site in dev tools, and it kind of shows us things. So if we go to the Ignite site and you just do inspect, which I'm sure all of you have done before, you can see like CSS is here, and we have all this HTML on the left here, And this is kind of how the site's laid out. So we can actually see what's being displayed on the site and how it's being displayed. And we can look at how things are made. So if you find a website that's like you think is really cool and you want to see how they did something, it's a very good way to go in and just like look at their CSS and look at their HTML and figure out how they did it. So then you can duplicate it on your own site. Yeah, so inspect element styles, and HTML are there. So if you're editing on a site, like we can make, let's see, if I want to make this title bigger or have a bigger margin, I can edit right in the browser and I can make this margin a lot bigger or smaller. This is not actually messing up anything besides on my browser. So if you're doing something on your site, you can mess with things as much as you want and it won't edit your files. But then you can save the file as separately. I recommend editing something on your site, finding out what works for you, and then putting it in CSS. That's probably the easiest. But if you do want to save a whole file for a website, this is how you would do that. Yeah, so sometimes it doesn't work just because of private servers, but it is a way to save a website as files. Yeah, here's some more functionality. Yeah, here's just some more resources. Remember, all these green tags for the slides are just resources you can go back and look at, and the slides are found on the Schulich website. Yeah, so we're gonna look at like next week's little sneak peek of what we're gonna look at and how to do these things. But for now, we just learned the HTML and CSS basics and how to get started with those. So these exercises, there are 3 levels of exercises, and you have a week to complete them. So yeah, so if you go to the link at the top of the slides, there was a link to the GitHub, and you can download the starting files. And then if you have questions, you can ask your mentors on Discord, or there's also a help channel. Yeah, so level 1 and 2 is this site, and level 3 is this other site. For doing these things, you like if you were at the first session, you know this, you want to do the highest one you can do, and sometimes you have to do 1, 2, and 3. So yeah, 1 and 2, you have to do 1 to do 2. Yeah, submitting exercises. So here's a link for submitting exercises. It's a Google form. Also, if you go to the Scorch thing, again, here's the submitting exercise, and that'll take you to the form to submit. So you can either go to the slides or this button on the Schulich website, Schulich.net website. And that is it. So we'll give you some time in your break rooms with your mentors to get started on these or ask questions from the session, anything you're confused about. And thank you for coming, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
No problem.